Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammad podcast. Today, our guest is Madiha. Madiha is the very first Pakistani American physician that we've had on the show, because we have had Pakistani Americans before, but not one quite as accomplished as this young lady. So I'm very excited to have a conversation with her about how she was able to accomplish that. Madiha, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be in your show.
Wonderful. So let's start off with, because I'm really curious, we hear a lot about girls in Pakistan. We know how difficult it is to be a girl growing up in Pakistan. So obviously we're all very familiar with male Pakistani doctors. They're all over the place, but we don't meet that many female Pakistani doctors. And so I wanted to ask you about how you grew up. Was it in any way unique or different from the typical Pakistani girl? Just tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, maybe a little bit atypical because I was born in Pakistan. I was born in Lahore. Then my family moved to, Algeria. So I spent my childhood abroad. It was an Arab country, Arab Muslim country. So we grew up there. It was pretty, kind of liberal, secular back then, Algeria. I came back to Pakistan when I was in my fifth grade. So we didn't, had the basic Pakistani primary education. So then I, started catching up, and so that was a little bit atypical. That I was like little different than the other normal Pakistani children. But after that, my schooling, rest of the schooling was in Lahore. And then I got into medical school in Pakistan, and I did my MBBS, graduated, and then I moved to USA. And
Wonderful. So I want to ask you a little bit about your schooling in Pakistan, because actually I discovered you through a post that you had made where you were sharing a picture of a Pakistani school book, where it had like these, little cute drawings and everything. And it was talking about how mom and my sisters serve us dinner, just like normalized, the sexism that we're so used to. And you were sharing those books, and basically you were obviously incensed about how, you know, casual they are with their sexism. So I wanted to ask you about schooling for you in Pakistan, or maybe not necessarily just schooling, but the community. Did you experience a lot of that sexism?
Oh, a lot. In Pakistan, it is so casual that you don't even realize how the everybody is sexist around you, because once you get out of that system, then you realize, oh my God, it is at every level. Sexism, the way girls. So the first thing that hit me, I was a very, kind of tomboyish kind of girl when I was growing up, especially when I moved from Algeria to Pakistan. There was a cultural shock. In Algeria, I never felt I was a girl. But immediately you come to Pakistan, you're like 12 years old, your breasts are developing, you're like, growing up. I was supposed to sit home, and I loved bicycling. So, and I loved playing cricket with, all other kids, all the outdoor sports. But in Pakistan, the girls are supposed to stay indoors, and that I hated. I hated that. And I like literally made fuss about it. I kept on, going playing with my younger brother's friends up until seventh grade. So I was like 12 years old, and I was supposed to stop by fifth grade when you're 10 years old. But I was like a little bit of a rebellious. So I did that. But then very soon I realized, like, everybody's looking at me as if I'm not a, pious or modest girl. So then, like we started having like these love letters at my home. And boys used to drop me, because if you're playing outside with other boys, they automatically assume you're loose, and
Yeah.
you're out there asking for it, that kind of. And imagine you're just a little girl, but you're reminded that now you're a woman, you're supposed to sit home. So that was end of that. Once those letters started coming, my parents, and my parents actually didn't say anything, but I realized now everybody's judging me for just playing with the boys. So that was like first thing that hit me very hard, like, no, I'm different, I'm supposed to, why I realized it was so unfair. And after that, you kind of accepted your fate, and then you're supposed to cover your head when you leave the house. So I did that. When I got into med school, I decided I'm not gonna cover my head. I'm just gonna, because I just wanted to be myself. So decided not to. But even in my college, it was like basically male dominating. Women are supposed to be, shy, and there was a in my college there was a library, and under the library, boys used to like, girls and boys would be sitting, but if you're alone passing through that area, you will be catcalled.
Mm.
Imagine in med school. So that kind of, this sexism, you go on the market, you go to the bazaar, you're catcalled, you're groped. It's so common. Every Pakistani woman has been groped or molested or sexually harassed. You will hardly find any women who has not been, harassed or molested in Pakistan. So it is so common. Sexism, women are not supposed to be seen outside. Even if you are outside, you're supposed to, be very careful, cautious. You're supposed to take somebody outside with you. You cannot just like go, going for shopping, I'm going to the mall, you take your car and go. Maybe things have changed now, but at that time when I was growing up, it was like you're supposed to be accompanied by somebody.
Yeah, I don't think things have changed very much, according to what I've been hearing from people in Pakistan. I see very aptly behind you, there's a book entitled Men Who Hate Women. I'm like, oh, that's exactly what we're talking about here today. Yeah. So it sounds to me like maybe your family was open-minded. What we call liberal thinkers in the Muslim world are very different from liberal thinkers in the Western world, but we would call your family liberal thinkers, in the Muslim world, obviously. But the society at large around you, that's where the restrictions were. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really good, because a lot of times people say things like, oh, the Quran, for example, says that men can beat their wives. So does that mean that every Muslim man is going to beat their wife? No, it doesn't. But it means the ones that want to beat their wives have divine sanction to beat their wives. You know what I mean? There's going to be good men, of course, and there's going to be bad men. But the bad men have this, definitive proof from their Allah that they're not doing anything wrong. And that's the problem. And that's the problem in Pakistan and in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and all of these countries, is when the law enforcement and the government is misogynist, is meant to control women. Look at Iran, for example. Then it doesn't matter how open-minded you are as a family, as individuals, when you're going to be restricted by your government. And then, of course, the families like mine, I was the exact opposite situation of you. I was living in Canada, where it's obviously a free country, but my family was the one that was restricting me. So, quite often women have both layers. They have a restrictive family and a restrictive government. And it's like, it's so difficult to find a situation where there's a Muslim girl who can live a comfortable, happy, free life. There's always going to be something in her way. Before we move on to your life in Pakistan a bit more, I want to just go back to Algeria, because I know that during the 90s, that was a very dark time with Islamists kind of um, swelling, taking over, controlling, like actually killing women who are not wearing hijab, or who are traveling without men. And there was a lot of Algerian refugees that came to Canada at that time. They're fleeing all over the world to get away from the Islamists there. Did you see any of that when you were there, or was that before?
I did see a lot of, they're very crude, they're very raw, they're not highly educated. But at that time, when, as far as I can remember, because I was very young, I can remember the girls were pretty dressing up like, the girls in Turkey dress up, like they would wear tank tops, skirts, Muslim girls. So it wasn't as bad as I think we got out of it before all the radicalization. I know now it's not. If I go there, I won't recognize it's the same country because there is radicalization all over the Islamic world
You're
now.
absolutely correct. It did. It started like around when this Islamic Revolution in Iran, and then it just spread like a virus throughout the Middle East and North Africa. And now it's, of course, continuing to spread into the West right now, too. So that's really sad. Of course, I can't, I mean, Pakistan probably never had a day when it was when it was
Yeah.
open-minded and liberal or secular or
No.
anything like that, because it was the entire reason for its existence was,
Islamic.
yeah, exactly. It was Sharia and Islamization and that whole separatist attitude. So Pakistan
Since
is
you
one of the
mentioned that
worst.
Quranic words, the wife beating, I don't
Yeah.
even I don't even think my father knew about this verse existed. He was very liberal. He was very, secular. He never said anything to us like pray, do this, don't do that. Never. Not even my mother, because they were both educated. They went to a desire to teach because they were teaching college students. English was it was an elective subject, so they were teaching English and maths. So they were educated, so they never. But I remember, I know a family member who used to beat, like not my family member, but my one of my close family member was married to the person, used to beat her with the Quran. Oh, this allows me to beat you.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Oh,
this
wow.
gives me the right to beat you. So that person knew his right to beat her with the Quran, and but my father, he probably doesn't even know this verse exists in Quran. So this is how different men are in the Muslim world. There would be some men who's like, no, you're supposed to love your wife. This verse doesn't mean like that. But there are men who knows that this verse exists and they have the right to beat.
And I have to say that when you teach young boys these things, it puts the ideas in their minds. So it's like when you were saying, even as a young girl, if you're playing outside, riding a bike, they're going to look at you like, "Oh, she's a whore." Even though
Mhm.
you're like a literal child, but that's the judgment that they're going to make about you because you're not wearing hijab, because you're playing outside, because you're riding a bike. You know what I mean? It's these social ideas that we create the misogyny in these boys. And when you take those young boys and you teach them these verses in the Quran, when you tell them your wife is basically like less than a dog, and if she is disobedient, then you hit her. I mean, we don't even hit our own animals, but no, you hit your wife if she disobeys. Then we're putting those ideas in those boys' heads. We're raising them to be the kind of men that you just described that is going to grow up to beat his wife. And the fact that your father never learned these verses means that he would have just naturally been a normal, good human being that would never think to hit his wife. You know what I mean? But if he grew up in an environment that taught him, oh no, this is what you do, this is how you control your wife, then he would think, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do as a man, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is in Pakistan, but in Arab societies, if a man doesn't control his wife, then he's constantly berated by the rest of the society. They're always telling him, oh, you're so weak. Oh, you can't control your wife. Like he's the one who's going to be attacked for not being a misogynist asshole, you know?
In Pakistan, it's the same thing. There is a word for it. It's called zan murid. Zan means women, like zans mean, and murid means slave. So they call the men who are slave to their wives the men who are just being decent human beings, treating their wives with respect and equality. They're labeled as this. So my father would be labeled as one because the way he was, he would be called that. But I don't think he cared, But there are guys who really like care about it, so they want to like appear tough in front of their own family. They would be nice to their wives when they're alone, but when they're with the family, they would try to demean her or disrespect her. And I've seen that happening as well, just to tell their family, "Oh, I'm controlling my wife. She's under me. She's under my thumb." So this is actually happening in Pakistan too.
Yeah. There's a subset of Arab culture sometimes where on the wedding day they hit their wife in front of all of the guests. They slap her in the face to show from the beginning that I am the man and I am going to control her. And you see these videos all over YouTube. People are sharing them on Twitter and whatnot. And they think, oh, it's just this horrible man. How could he hit his wife on their wedding day? And I'm like, it's not just one horrible man. That's the society. That's what they encourage, you know. They want to see that. And you know what happens after he slaps her? Everybody claps.
And
Everybody
the
claps.
and the bride clapped too.
No, no, she's not clapping, but she's expecting it. She knows it.
Okay.
This is what has to happen. Publicly, he's going to demean you because now you are his, and this
Wow.
is your new place in life. Yeah. So tell me about moving to America, because that must have been, you know, after living in Algeria and living in Pakistan, I'm sure going to America must have been like breathing oxygen for the first time as a woman.
Yeah, it was basically what happened was my life story is kind of not as straightforward. I got married and then I moved here. Um, so like things took a very strange turn. My, there was a problem. My ex was not, what his education. He lied about his education. So there was like whole different scenarios. So I had to struggle in the beginning in America. I had to start from scratch. I, worked in gas stations, like collected money, and I had a son. So along with
Oh my
him,
God.
I was working. I was studying for my exams, USMLE, and then I was like raising my son as well. So I used to like, go to work, come back home, take him in my, lap and study for 5 6 hours while he's in my lap. So I and then sleep for a few hours, then go back to work. So I was like working around the clock. I did like do two jobs at one point just to collect money and survive. And then I kind of you can call me like an American dream, somebody worked from scratch way up and then achieved. So it was kind of a rocky start in America. It was a cultural shock as well. It was not like I was I was lying in bed of roses here.
Yeah.
And I was not telling my family back home as well. I didn't want to make them worried about me. So I was telling them everything is good and I'm like thriving here and all that, but I was struggling. So in first few years in America, first 4 or 5 years, I was like really struggling very bad. But I, got my residency and things, got better from that time.
Yeah,
So
you did it. You made it. So the studying that you were doing, that was because you were already a physician, right? This was just sort
yeah,
of, I guess, to transfer to get like to make
yeah.
American.
You have to take step one, USMLE United States Medical License exam, step two, step three. Then you have to go for residency match. You have to interview, you have to apply for programs, and you have to go to every state where you get the interviews. So you have to travel. It's a lot of expense. And
Mm,
then you have to wait for, it's like a year-long process. It's not easy. And then you
hmm.
interview these places and you wait for the match. It happens 4 5 years, 4 5 months later. They announce it online, and then uh, people find out if they got the residency or not. So it's a long process.
Wow. Well, good for you. That's amazing. I'm honored and proud. You know, I'm really grateful that you came to share your story with us today, because I think that's probably the most important part of your story right there that you just told us, that resilience. Because it, even if, you know, I'm obviously there's a lot of culture shock. It's always difficult moving from one country to another. But you know, you had to overcome so many more obstacles than the average person. but you did it. You see, that's the common thread between a lot of the people that I have on this podcast is we have the most insurmountable odds in front of us, and it looks like we're never going to be able to make it through, but we just keep pushing. And that's why I love to have conversations with women like you, because I know there's so many other people out there that are watching these episodes, and I know because they're sending me messages all the time, feeling like they are in that position that you were in when you first arrived, going through a divorce, a single mom, having to work at a gas station, having to, Americanize your medical license, all of those things that you had to go through. But you kept pushing and you did it, and that's an inspiration to so many people out there. So how did your family react to the divorce? Like, was your family pretty cool about that? Were they like sort of normal, or did they go and be, Muslim about it?
So my father had passed away when I, did divorce, so he didn't know. But he knew that I wasn't happy at that time. My mother was the one actually who was pushing me to divorce because he
Wow.
figured that he was not the right person. Because when she came to America, she lived with me for a few months, and then she realized that I actually didn't realize. My mother made me realize because I was so
Oh,
busy working and everything. I didn't know what his antics were. So she said that your future is dark if you stay with him. So she's the one who pushed me. I give her the credit, and then she opened my eyes, and then I saw it for myself as well. My family is pretty supportive. Everybody's, yeah, they were like, maybe they were not because they were not with me. I was not living with them, so they didn't know the whole situation, what was going on. But they had confidence in me that I would take the right steps. So they were okay with me.
that's wonderful. That's one in a million story that
Yeah.
you just told. That's fantastic that you have two wonderful parents. So that's really great. Now, what about when you decided to leave Islam? What, were they
Yeah, so
just
so
as
the Islam is connected to my divorce. So I was going through divorce, and
mm,
by that time I had two kids. Like I have a daughter as well. So and then divorce is not an easy thing. No matter how bad your marriage was, when you go for divorce, even though I filed it, I was still under a lot of distress. It's like a soul crushing experience. If somebody had gone through, they would know. And especially when you're alone, you have no family, so I thought I'll connect with God. I started reading Quran, and I decided to read it in Urdu. I said I'll just learn it with understanding. I would just connect with God. So I started, listening to the translation in Urdu, and I was I was in pain, and I thought I'll get some words of, uh, comfort from
comfort?
God. But instead, you keep reading Quran, and if God seems like a very angry guy who's like just wants to throw you in hell, and he just like hates Jews and Christians, and he just wants to, and he's like threatening constantly throughout the Quran, like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, your skin will come off, and I'll give you new skin, and that will burn, and you will burn until eternity, then the good people will be in heaven. Like this message is on repeat, and then God starts praising himself for no reason. Then some story starts like randomly from in the middle. That story doesn't end, but next story starts. The next topic starts, like keeps jumping from now one topic to another. And I was like listening to, I was like, where am I in this? Like, when is God gonna tell me I got you? I am like, I'm gonna take care of you, your love. Like, nowhere. I was like, I kept on going until 13 chapters, and my heart was already in so much, distress. It was so heavy on my heart. The message, I couldn't take it. I was like, why God is threatening me? I'm gonna go to hell. What did I do? I'm already in distress. Like I thought he was telling me that he's gonna throw me in hell, because when you read Quran and it's like talking to you, right? Who
Yeah.
else is it talking about? And then it was like I stopped reading after 13 chapters. Like, I can't take it anymore. There's nothing new in it. Like, it's the same thing over and over again. So at that time, one of my friend was she was doing her PhD from Pakistan, so she came to America, and she confided in me because I'm like, I'm a very rational and tolerant person. Like people open up to me very easily. So she said she's an atheist, and at that time, I felt very bad for her. Like, oh, may Allah guide her in the right direction. I felt so bad. I was like, oh, so she's gonna go to hell. So maybe I should help change her mind. So she gave me some arguments. There are some scientific inaccuracies in Quran. I didn't know that much about Quran, so I was like, I went and started, like to counter her arguments. So I started listening to Zakir Naik's videos.
Boy.
You've heard of it.
Yeah.
So I would go back to her to counter her, like tell her I said, there is entropy mentioned in Quran, right? So she told me about other scientific inaccuracies. So I would go back, like listen to videos to give her the arguments back and forth. We kept on going. And then, I rejected all the Zakir Naiks. I was like, no, he's not, as educated. So I started listening to Ghamidi. He's another scholar. I don't know if you know about him. So he's very Javed Ahmed Ghamidi. He's kind of modern kind of scholar. Like if you say liberal version of Islam,
Mhm.
he's not a typical mullah. So he would even say like women don't have to wear hijab. You're only supposed to be hijab of your eyes or your soul or something like that. Some
Yeah.
mystical version of Quran that's not true, but
Yeah.
he trying to do some makeup of the Islam to make it palatable or digestible. So a lot of modern like Muslims or moderate Muslims would try to adopt his kind of version of Quran, but it has nothing to do with the real Quran, right? So I
Mhm.
started listening to him. So I really wanted to know what he has to say about the existence of God. He had this 50-minute long video about somebody asked him a question, does God exist? And he speaks in very like authentic Urdu, where he uses very difficult words, and it's all basically wording, how he words the sentences, like makes them beautiful, like literally like poems, but in there's no substance in it.
Yeah.
So he went on for 50 minutes, but he didn't answer the question. I was like, maybe I missed the point when he answered, does God exist or not? So I listened to it again, and I was like, there was nothing. So I said, okay, so God doesn't exist. There is no proof that God exists. After that, it kind of opened my eyes, and then I went back to Quran reading, like, the curtain has lifted about the, all that revelation or whatever you call it. So I started reading Quran again with critical eye. So now you could, like when you read Quran not with the devotion, you read it as a critic, you can spot so many mistakes. And that's what happened. Like I spotted so many mistakes, like the Aisha's story where her necklace is lost, and God sends a special verse to say that she's innocent. So, I was like, why God is sending this verse? Like, what are we supposed to do with it now? After
Mhm.
1400 years later, it's a useless verse for us. What are we supposed to learn from this incident? Like, what is this? And then there were like meaningless verses, so many.
Yeah,
So
like the verse, my favorite is the verse that where Allah says, after you're finished having dinner at the Prophet of Allah's house, please leave
leave.
promptly.
Yeah.
Don't hang
Yeah,
out
there was like
long.
guidelines. So there,
Yeah.
there was another verse where God says that all Muslim men can marry their adopted sons' wives.
Mhm.
So that was very specific. I was like, no
Mhm.
Muslim man that I know have ever married their like, no, their daughter-in-law. Like
Mhm.
even in like non-Muslim households, it's frowned upon.
Mhm.
So this verse only served purpose to one man. So
Exactly.
that means it was written by him. It's
Mhm.
like literally common sense. I don't know why people support like go
Mhm.
around and around trying to make it something that it's not.
Even
Like
Aisha said that in one hadith. She says, "Oh, I find it curious that, your God always tends to say things that perfectly align with what you want.
Yeah, she probably figured it out and they just
Hmm.
removed all this from the literature because
Hmm.
she had fought so many, wars. She must know something that this is
Hmm.
not real.
And she knows him, right? She's
Yeah,
been with him literally her whole life. She
yeah.
grew up with
10
him.
years, 10
Yeah.
years. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, she was a child. So she
Yeah,
got to see him, you know what I mean? Like she got to know him intimately, I think, more than his persona that he's presenting to the rest of the
yeah,
world. That doesn't really work on children. Children don't
right.
care about personas and your what
Mm.
your name is or what your status is. They don't care. And so she's just seeing him as a normal person. And so I think she could see through him. But people today still can't. But Madiha, I love the description of the Quran because that is exactly how it is. It's people always say like, "Oh, it's so poetic." If you don't understand it, it's because it's like the best poetry that was ever written. I'm like, "No, it's really badly edited." Like it's so repetitive. And like you said, he starts a story and then he ends it, and then there's like random things in there that don't make any sense. What are they connected to? There's so many words in there even that we still don't know what the meaning is, and they'll tell you things like, oh, Allahu alam, only Allah knows. Such divine
Why is he
meaning.
writing?
Why is he writing that? Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of people, myself included, became non-believers in this religion once we started to look at the Quran with a critical eye. That's all it takes. All it takes
Mm.
is to read that one book. You forget the hadith. The hadith are so easy. Anybody reading, if anybody bothered to read through the hadith, there's just so many of them. It's just, and most people don't bother. Um, but it's so easy. If you start reading the hadith, immediately you're going to realize, okay, this is just a mess. You know, this is just absolute nonsense. But most people don't crack open those, just so many volumes of a hadith. But if you're going to pick up the Quran and start reading it, read it translated in your language. Like you said, before you get to the end of the book, you're going to realize this whole thing is just absolute nonsense.
Actually, the
David.
interesting thing is, I left Islam even before finding out the wife beating Hadith, before finding out the sex slaves. Like, all these things just kind of confirmed that I was right. But I left Islam just by reading 13 chapters on my own and these meaningless verses that served only Prophet's purpose. There was another verse, the third. So there were three verses that were my deal breaker. I was like, this guy was writing verses for himself. There's a verse that if you call your wife your sister or your mother, you're like your back is just like your mother or my mother, then your marriage is broken. You're supposed to freeze this many slaves, or you're slaughter this many camels, or do fast for this many days. And I was like, what's the big deal? Just apologize. Like, why do you have to and then it's like, we don't have slaves anymore, so this solution of God is expired. So what was like,
Mm,
so that tells you the message is not timeless. This
mhm.
message is expired.
Yeah.
So these were my objections. So I did not even know about ex-Muslim movement. I did not know anybody else left Islam. I only knew about my friend who was an atheist at that. So I was in a vacuum and I left it. I was like, no, it's not for me.
Yeah. Have you read Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses?
I haven't read it, but I've read like Christopher Hitchens' The God Is Not Great. I
Yeah.
have Richard Dawkins'
Yeah. No, it's
God.
because what you just described there. So the first person to be killed for apostasy was actually Muhammad's scribe. So he was illiterate, right? So when he
Yeah.
got he got a message from Allah, Gabriel told him, through the ancient telephone, he would tell his scribe, write this down. And that scribe was the first person to realize that Muhammad was just full of BS. And so he's the first person to say, I don't believe in you anymore, and I don't believe in your Allah, and he was killed. And in the Satanic verses, there's also a character like that who realizes, that these verses that Muhammad is telling me, first of all, they coincide perfectly with what he wants to do when he wants to do it. And also, he forgets sometimes. Like he has it written down, the scribe has it written down so he knows. And so he'll ask Muhammad, like, this verse that you just talked about now contradicts the one that you said before. How is Allah confused? But
Yeah.
Allah's not confused. It's Muhammad that's confused. And so it's the same sort of thing. Like once you start reading it and you can see through it right away that this is the work of a man, and a not so intelligent man at that. So how did your family react to you deciding that you didn't want to be a Muslim anymore?
So my family is open-minded. So as I told you, my mother, of course, she felt really bad, but then I think she forgot. My brothers and my sister told not to tell her, not to argue with her, because she would feel bad. Then she will be sad for you, and she would pray to God for you to come back. There is no point to make your parents sad at this age.
Mm-hmm.
They have lived all their lives with this religion. They're not going to leave at this point. They're not rational because the way they were raised. So
Yeah,
the God is basically in their DNA now.
yeah.
So, but my other brothers and my sister, they're pretty cool with it.
That's one. My God, you come from like the perfect little family that all of us wish we could have come from. That's wonderful, Madiha. So tell us about your life now. So now you are remarried?
Yeah,
Yeah. So congratulations on
thank
finding
you.
a good man that your mom would approve of. And your life as a physician has now, now it's more comfortable. You're obviously not suffering as you did when you first came, and everything has kind of mellowed out. Did you imagine this for yourself when you were a kid growing up in Pakistan? Did you ever think, oh, I'm going to be living in America as a physician, married with two kids? Yeah, the dream come
Never.
true.
I mean, I was not, I was a very, like, tomboyish, never thought about my future and never even thought about getting married. I was like, my sister was like very much fascinated by bridal clothes and all that. Like, even when I got married, I wore her bridal dress. I was like that least bothered. I was like, you have that dress. I'm just gonna wear that. So I was never into these things. But I think the way my life turned out, how I struggled, and like literally at one point I was like rock bottom. I was, I tell everybody, because people, when they see you, you're like comfortable in your life, they don't realize how much hardships you have come over. There was a
Yeah.
time in my life then I didn't have money for gas for my
Hmm.
car. There was a time in my life that I used to sit in Barnes and Noble and Starbucks to study, because exams, medicine exams are hard. You have to study 8 hours straight sitting on in chair. So I used to have 1 cup of coffee, and then I would save that cup, come next day to get a refill, 50 cents. Then I would change, use the same cup. So I used to sit in that Starbucks. All employees knew me, so they would just give me a new cup, because as a courtesy, just
Hmm.
for the 50 cents. So I just tell people, like, don't lose hope. If you're at the bottom, just keep your eyes up, like, have a goal, have a target. So I think I have seen so much, going through divorce in America alone. I've like gone through the courts and all that, lawyers and whatnot. So I have seen life so close. It makes me I think I've always been very vocal about issues too. So I find it like, I just think like educating other people and getting them out of this cult. I feel like it's my passion to speak up against any injustice, especially for women, inequality. I sometimes think to myself, like, I'm comfortable in my life. What's my problem? Why can't I just like enjoy what I have? Like, but this, I enjoy doing this. So yeah.
and you get to give back. It's so rewarding. And it's like all of this darkness in your past that you're talking about, all of these negative experiences, if you're able to turn them into something positive now, which is to share your experience with others, to inspire them to keep going, like you said, then it sort of feels like all of that stuff was like, it was not for nothing. You know what I mean? Because now you're going to help other people. And I totally feel the same way as you. I've actually had ex-Muslim women tell me, like, why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself in danger? Why are you putting your family in danger? Why don't you just, like, you have a great husband, you have a great kids, you have a great home, just live your life quietly and appreciate your life. And it's because I feel like that would be so incredibly selfish, you know? I don't know if you feel this too, but I have such a sense of survivor's guilt as well. I'm reading the papers, I'm reading Twitter, I'm seeing what the women are going through throughout the world. I know what they're going through because I felt that. Even as far as Shani Luke on October 7th, seeing her body on that truck. You know what I mean? That's going to hit any one of us that has been a victim of this Islamic misogyny, this literal hate for women that they have. We're all going to feel that. We're all going to feel that immediately. And what kind of person would I be if I'm at the point in my life where I'm privileged to be able to speak, that I don't use my voice? You lived in Pakistan, that there's millions of girls, millions of women who can't speak. They can't open their mouth. And some of them don't even know. Some of them don't even know that the horrible circumstances that they're living in because it's so normalized. And so for you to use your voice to spread light and to spread, hope, my God, that's like that's the best possible use of your life,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why you have this YouTube channel, Madiha Talks, right? So
Right.
tell me a little bit about that channel and people that have contacted you and just your experience with that channel.
So I'll tell you why I started the channel. So I was in my class WhatsApp group of my med school, and I used to be very vocal about a lot of things, but you would be surprised how brainwashed people are in Pakistan and
No
how
idea.
radical they are. Yeah, you're not surprised. So in my entire class group of like, suppose there are 90 doctors, and they're not like just in Pakistan, they're spread all across the world. There somebody's sitting in Dubai, somebody's in Australia, somebody in Canada, a lot of people in USA. I was only feminist. So the feminism movement started, with the Me Too. In 2017, they started women's march called Aurat March. Aurat means women.
Yes.
It started in Pakistan, and there was so much uproar in it. Like the women's were carrying slogans, like just the placards. And one of the placards says, "Apna khana khud garam kar lo," like heat up your own food, your own meal.
Mm.
That's all it said. It went like the whole Pakistan went into frenzy. Like, what are they saying? Oh my God, what, this is with only this placard, the Pakistani, it just smashed the whole Pakistani. They were like shattered. And then so the I was only feminist in my entire class. They were like all talking literally shit about women's marches, on these women's are loose characters and they don't want to stay in the house, and Islam has given all the rights in Surah Nisa and blah blah blah. Then there was a there one of their slogan was my body my choice, mera jism meri marzi. And everybody was like, oh, this is so sexualized. What do they want? To be whores? They want just sexual freedom. What's wrong with that? But in Pakistani society, women cannot talk about any kind of freedom. So it made me so upset. So I used to write like long, things. At the same time in India, there was a girl in Indian government. There were some Muslim issues going on. Indian government didn't want girls to wear hijab, like cover their face when they go to school. And there was this girl who stood up against all the goons and said, I want to wear hijab, I'm gonna cover my face. And everybody in Pakistan was cheering to that girl. And I was like, literally, what that girl is saying, my body, my choice. So it's okay if she wants to hear when she says it, but it's not okay when other women in Pakistan want to say, they're saying the same thing. They're saying, my body, my choice. So that girl, you're cheering on to that girl because she wants to cover herself, and your patriarchy is stabilized with her decision, but you're not okay. So these things made me so upset. So they kicked me out of the group because I used to challenge, I said, Islam sexualizes women because the concept of virgins in heaven is sexualizing women. And I just wrote that, and they was like, "Oh my God, what is she writing? And she's a feminist, and she's this. Her ideas don't align with our ideology." So I was kicked out of the group. So I got so pissed. I was like,
Just
if you don't let me
th-
speak,
this group
yeah.
was Pakistani doctors.
Doctors, they're like, it's not like they were not exposed to the secular liberal world. These people live in America, in West, but they still harbor this dissent and hatred for the Western culture. They still they have superiority complex that their culture, Islam, is gonna rule all over the world one day, and then everybody's gonna be Muslim and this and that. I mean, it's like, so they kicked me out, and then I was like, okay, I am so used to speaking up. I'm not gonna, nobody can stop me from speaking up. So then I did this interview with Haris Sultan when I left Islam. So I got in touch with him on Instagram. I saw his post. Somebody told me about Haris. Oh, he's an ex-Muslim. So you should watch his videos. Then I contacted Haris. I sent him one of my write-ups, and he said, "Oh, I should interview you." Then I did interview, and I was like, I told him I'm very vocal. I wanna. He said, "Why don't you start your channel?" So that's when I started my channel. So there was like this whole background behind this about women's issues and speaking up against injustice and this typical mindset.
And since you've started your channel, how have you how has it changed you? Like, have you felt a sense of relief, a sense of reward? Have you been contacted by girls, other Pakistani girls and women, for example?
I have been contacted by a lot of people, very few Pakistani girls. I don't know if women are scared or it's very difficult to change Pakistani women's mindset. For some reason, they're so happy in their bubbles. Like right now, the women I come across, they're very privileged women. They're like, because the circle you move in, it's all physicians, and they're all well settled in America. They're like, they're happy with their parties and handbags and designers and this and that. So they live in their bubbles, they don't care. The rest of the Pakistani girls in Pakistan, they're probably so Islamified, they're not gonna tune into my channel, which is an ex-Muslim or atheist channel. So I have not been able to penetrate through, that group of women, because women are not open-minded to even listen to any opinion other than Islamic.
So you mentioned the feminists that started the Aurat March. What about those women? How much power do they have in the country? Are they just being attacked every time they try to open their mouth? Is there
Yes. Each time they do this Aurat March, especially when Imran Khan came, he made it so much worse because he's a mullah from inside. He just doesn't show his beard outside. He let these mullahs attack women. They were literally attacked, and he didn't help them at all. He said women who would wear clothes, revealing clothes, they actually incite men. Men are not robots. One of his stupid statement was that. So he's a typical misogynist. He's a
Yeah.
playboy. He's never gonna be respecting women. So.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember one of his statements too that he made where he talked about even rape, and
Yeah.
people were talking about the numbers of people being raped in Pakistan are just astronomical. It's like every 2 hours somebody is sexually assaulted or something. And he complained. He said, "Yeah, it's because these women don't observe purdah. They don't cover themselves. They're not wearing hijab. And so that's why they're getting raped. So that's Imran Khan in a nutshell. All right. Well, you have quite a few messages here in the chat. I apologize. I haven't been able to read them all because some of them are really, really long, but I'm going to open it up to the group, and then hopefully the people that are writing these chats will just turn on their cameras or at least their microphones and then ask you the question. Ira, you're the first person on my list here. You've got a very long essay there. Can you unmute yourself and you can read it if you like, or maybe just summarize it for Madiha, up to you.
No, I think if Madiha wants to read it and answer after this session, that's fine. It's,
okay.
It's not directly in what we're doing, but the excuse given for Pakistan is that it's really the entire Indian subcontinent that's this way. Al Jazeera uses that argument all the time and produces loads of programs about how terrible India is toward women. Absolutely true. But that's the obvious purpose of the programs, and they say as much sometimes. So, of course, I wonder, how can we distinguish the Islamic component of this problem from the Indian subcontinent component? And Islam ruled most of the Indian subcontinent for a fairly long time. Did it make things worse, or did it actually make things better compared to the way Hinduism had done it? So that's what I'm wondering, but I don't know that that's what you've studied, and you may or may not want to answer that. I'm also wondering what the heck is going on between Pakistan and Iran, and if you have any thoughts on that.
So I'm not sure why I think Indian subcontinent people were conservative to begin with, because what I see is in Hindu mythology, women were treated, as subservient to men as well. If you see there's Ram and Sita story, I think I probably not saying the name right. He made her take the Agni Pariksha, like he made her, because one of the Ravan was the villain who took Sita from Ram, took his wife from him, and when she came back, he wouldn't accept her until she walked on the fire barefoot. So that's called Agni Pariksha, and she had to pass that test to show her modesty, or like that she was still untouched by the Ravan. And that story is part of their mythology. So I would assume women have the same status in Hinduism as like in Islam. So I think the area was conservative to begin with. I'm not sure why the people of subcontinent are worse than the rest of the world. But now the rest of the world is catching up. I think Turkey was the only country which was like liberal, secular. Women were wearing whatever they wanted to wear, bikinis and all that. Now they are also in under Erdogan. That's changing very rapidly. So that's your first question. The second, the Iran, what's happening with Iran? I don't know. Iran is trying to divert attention from the what's happening in Palestine. I really have no clue. I'm like, Pakistan army is not the, you know, innocent either. They have done their fair share, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
I would like to add to that, if I could, that obviously Christianity is full of a lot of misogyny as well. So is Judaism. I think probably every religion, we're going to find it, because these religions were made in times when that was acceptable, and that's the way the world was, like you mentioned slavery before, Madiha, like that was just the norm back then. There was no such thing as feminism, no such thing as equality, so that makes sense. But what makes Islam particularly insidious is Sharia, is Islamic law. And that's what you have in Pakistan. So this misogyny is codified into the law and is controlled by law enforcement. And so that encourages it to continue. Normally cultures can progress, but if you are forcing everybody to follow a 1400-year-old book through, threat of imprisonment, then you are going to stunt the natural growth of your society.
Right. There are some questions for me.
Yeah.
One is from Alia, and I agree with her that in Iran, women still stood up for themselves. In Pakistan, women, the feminist, the women who come for the Aurat March, the Women March, they don't see Islam as a problem. And so this is what happened in Pakistan. You're not, they can't be open about Islam, they can't criticize Islam, but a lot of them, like I would say 95% of them, don't see Islam as a problem. They think Islam has given them rights. Men are not giving them the rights that Islam has given them. So this is how they think. So I just feel like they're going in circles. Until and unless you challenge Islam, you cannot come out of your miserable situation that you are in, because Islam has institutionalized patriarchy. It is you know, it's like women defending Islam is like chicken defending KFC. It's the same thing. So you cannot be a feminist and a Muslim at the same time. So I agree with Alia. And I think what happens is in Pakistan, women are in their bubble that they're still waiting for Sharia laws, and like you go on the street and ask like a common person, do you want what do you think Pakistan should do? They would say, oh, Pakistan, if Pakistan had Sharia laws, all problems will be solved. In Iran, women have seen the curse of Islam firsthand. They have lived through it. Their whole lives were like in prison. Pakistani women are privileged enough not to have this forced enforced hijab and moral policing and their restriction to go wherever they want. So the Iranian women have stood up because they have lived through that horror. Pakistani women have not. They're still waiting. I was like, if you're waiting that much, maybe you deserve it. You know, it's like they don't realize that it's bad for you. Have you not seen what happened in Saudi Arabia? So many people in Saudi Arabia left us like leaving Islam. Like Middle East, the worst because they have seen Sharia laws firsthand. Same is gonna happen in Afghanistan. Women are gonna leave. They're gonna hate Islam, like a religion that literally treats them as a subhuman. Nobody would want it for their children either. I was on a Twitter space. There was a woman from Afghanistan. Somehow she got into Twitter and she was crying. She said, can somebody please take my daughters out of this country at least? I cannot get out, but anybody can adopt them. Like, I was like, literally, felt so helpless for that woman.
Speaking of women in Iran, Sarah is the next person who has a question for you.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
Good.
Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for sharing your story. Yasmine's podcasts are amazing because every time I feel like I'm the only one in this whole planet. I'm going to die alone and nobody's ever going to understand what I'm talking about. She has somebody and I have the privilege to be here. And it's the same thing again. And she always talks about Iran. And that's something I always have to acknowledge and thank her. I appreciate it because a lot of times when people talk about Islam and Muslims, Iran is just left out because we are Shia and they don't want to talk about us and we are not Arabs. So thank you, Yasmin, and thank you, Madiha. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about and I have a question. In Iran, we've been struggling. We've lost a lot of lives. One reason they're attacking Pakistan is because they're losing the plot. They need that crisis outside the country in order to calm down the country and control people. And that might be the reason why they're doing this to Pakistan. And of course, Pakistan is not having it because they have the power. The other thing is that you said you were a feminist. And I want to argue that you were an atheist before you even realized that you were an atheist, because feminism is blasphemous in Islam. Like there are so many verses in my favorite surah when you are half a man and you are inherit half, and your husband can have 4 wives and as many slaves as he wants, and you are not allowed to do that. Or he can beat you up if you're rebellious, and they never discuss what rebellion means. So even the idea of being a feminist in Iran, it could lead to your execution because blasphemy leads to execution. And I want to go back to what you started to talk about, because this for me right now is very important, and that's the idea of hijab and covering up. And you mentioned this, that you were catcalled and harassed, and how we all share that. Like, I don't know any Muslim or ex-Muslim woman, especially coming from Iran, who has at one point not been groped or harassed or catcalled or assaulted or raped. Like, it goes up. I was assaulted, first time I was assaulted on a bus, I was 11 years old. And I didn't know that it was an assault. I was watching Sex Education a couple of years ago, and there are just these teenagers talking about how one of them was assaulted. I'm sitting there thinking, that's why I'm suffering from PTSD. That's why my life is like this anxiety that I have right now. And I was watching a video on Twitter a couple of days ago about these two white women. One of them is in niqab, one of them is in complete hijab, and they're talking about victims of grooming gangs in the UK and how it's their fault because they were not modest and they were not covered up. And if they were covered up, they would be safe. And I'm sitting there thinking, slut shaming, victim blaming, like this doesn't make any. How can you just? What is your problem with facts? Like, how is that? I was completely covered up. Every single woman in Iran is always completely like, we are fighting back. They are fighting back now. But when I was growing up, we didn't dare to. We were not allowed to show hair at all. So I want you, please, to explain or go back to this and talk about your experience when you were covering up, or women in your country when they were covering up, and how this is just a pandemic. It's an epidemic. It's touching everyone, no matter how covered up or not covered up you are. Because there is this myth in the Western world right now, and white women are buying into it, that if you're covered up, you're safe. If you go to Islam, you're safe. Women in Islam have lots of rights. Sorry, now I'm rambling. So I'm just going to stop talking. And if you please just explain, elaborate about your experience when you were covering up and not covering up.
I just feel like when you're covered up, you are actually admitting that you're inferior. You know, you're basically telling the men the public space belongs to you. I am just here because I am, inferior and I need to do something. You know, in Islam, Pakistan, they say, oh, women are supposed to go out of the house only if they really, really, really need to go out, you know. And you're right, you said I was a atheist even before I realized I was an atheist, because what happened is when I was going through divorce, I decided to, go for Umrah. I said, I really need to, feel some, comfort from God. So I really need to go to God's house. And I was told that I cannot go alone without a mahram. At that time, they said, oh, but if you can take your son, he's your mahram. My son was like 8 or 9 years old. I was like, I am the one taking care of him. I am his caretaker. I'm like feeding him. I'm going alone to work all by myself. And I'm like in America surviving alone with 2 kids.
But
and
you don't
if I
have a
to go to
penis.
God, what if I have to go and see God, I need a man to tag
You
along?
are subservient forever to a man. You are subjugated in this
I decided
religion.
I'm not gonna go. Even though I needed God so bad, I was like, I'm not gonna go. I stood up on the principle. And I was a Muslim
Good
back
for
then.
you.
I just got so angry at this. It's like, I'm not gonna go. That's it. I'm just gonna deal with it. So yeah, I was a feminist. I always questioned why Muslim men marry 4 times, why women have to cover. Don't we have eyes? Don't we have brains? We can like guys too. Like, you temptation, right? So I was like, so women are not tempted, only men are tempted? Like, isn't that dehumanizing women? Like, you think women are just basically statues, and their wishes or whatever their feelings don't matter, only men's feeling matter? And yeah, hijab doesn't make you secure. It actually exposes you, makes you more vulnerable. Because if a girl is not covered and she's wearing a jeans, a man would be very scared of touching her, because he would say, I don't know if she's gonna slap me back, because she seems like very confident. So that's the situation. And even if women go for Hajj, they're covered from head to toe, they're groped. And the women will tell their stories how they were groped while performing Umrah, or performing, when they circumambulate between around the Kaaba. And so there are little children in the madrasas and seminaries in Pakistan who get raped. But like, so if and these molestation and abuse has nothing to do with sexual attraction. It has to do with it's a power. They're basically exerting their power, they're exercising their power, it's control, and they take pleasure out of it. So it has nothing to do with your sexual fantasies and desires. The men who grope you at a bus stop, they're just telling you, oh, I have the power here. You are in my territory. So I don't think it covers you. It protects you.
I think it's indoctrination from a very young age, just to like, we have to cover up at the age of 7 to go to school. In
Yeah.
order to get out of the house, we have to cover up. It's mandatory.
I
So-
was still Muslim when I decided to brainwash my daughter into Islam. At that time, I hadn't left Islam, so she was like 5 years old. I started sending her to the mosque, right? So the mullani in the mosque, the whatever scholar, she would wear skirts, right? My daughter, but I would give her a small scarf. But that wouldn't cover her hair like it was a fashionable scarf. Just I wanted my daughter to look cute. So she would object why her legs are not covered. Imagine 5-year-old girl. And then she would object that her scarf is not proper scarf. So she gave her this like, I don't know, that thing that covers the whole thing, hijab. And my daughter would hate it. She was like 5 years old. And I never, put anything on her. She dresses up like the way she was like a sassy little girl, how girls are. So she would hate it. And then whenever she would come back, she would feel very depressed and sad. I stopped sending her. I was like, when I saw that this Mulani is trying to indoctrinate slowly trying to tell her this, she's supposed to wear hijab and her body should be covered. This is how early the brainwashing of little girls start. By the time they're 12 or 13, they feel like it is the necessity and they feel uncovered, exposed to the world. By the time they're 18, they think they cannot live without it. And then they think it's my choice. No, it's not. You were brainwashed into this from an early
it's
child.
PTSD. It is PTSD.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
so many of us, we experience this. Like I talked about this on one of the podcasts with Yasmine as well, that when I have air or the wind in my hair, I feel like, oh my God, they're gonna kill me, or that somebody's gonna attack me, I'm gonna get arrested. And they're, oh no, you're safe, you're okay. And somebody else was talking about this on Twitter. I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one then. It makes sense now.
No, I have the same PTSD. When I was young, like maybe 9, 10 years old, there was an aunt in our house. She was very Islamic. So no, my parents didn't care about Islam, but she used to come and tell us. So she told me whenever a woman goes out in public with her hair exposed, angels curse at her. I have this PTSD even now when I go outside because I don't cover my head and I feel like somebody is there cursing at me. This is how bad it is.
Thank you, Madiha. I appreciate it, and thank you, Yasmine.
Thank you both. Tochi, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but you're next.
Yes, thanks. Hi. It is correct. What's up, Yasmin? I love your videos, by the way. So,
Thank you.
yeah. I came at this very different. Like I'm a hip hop dude, and there's a dude I know in Japan. Funny enough, who was like, "Yo, check out this conversation." It was like that you had. I can't remember, with some lady, and I was like, "Oh, this is dope." Anyway, I want to just tell a very brief story, but because y'all were talking about the head covering. But I have family in Texas, so I was flying out of Austin to come back to Toronto. And I'm talking to this lady from Memphis at the counter, the Air Canada counter, whatever. And so somehow she was like, I'm really thinking about converting to Islam. I love I love the hijab. I love the idea of it. It makes me feel protected. It feels like men respect you more when you wear it. So I was like, oh, well, okay. I mean, to each his or her own. But
why is she having this conversation with an Air Canada employee? Like, how random.
We were talking about, we connected. We were talking about where life growing up or whatever. I'm not even sure how we came to the topic. But I told her, I was like, oh, okay, well, in my honest opinion, well, I used to, I went to high school in Saudi. I used to live in Saudi Arabia. And she was like, where? I was like, I used to live in Saudi Arabia. She was like, where? And I was like, you've never even heard of Saudi Arabia? Like, she was like, no, I've never heard of it. And I was like, so I think it's fascinating that someone who is thinking about converting to Islam hasn't even heard of Saudi Arabia. What that tells me is that there's some kind of campaign going on somewhere. People are spending real money to sort of, spread Islamic ideas. That's what that tells me. But
Yeah.
anyway. Um, but my question for you, Madiha, was, as a non-believer, do you feel that atheism can ever really sort of catch on as a majority worldview, or do you think it'll always be like just a bunch of us, like a minority folk, if that
Like
makes sense, you
fringes.
know?
So what I think is that right now we are all like very isolated. Like we need to all join forces and educate the Western people as well. Like I see some of other I see Ira and Louis. I think we need to spread the word how toxic Islam is. Until and unless someone give us platform, like ex-Muslim from Pakistan, because I'm banned. I won't be banned in Pakistan. My channel might get blocked or something. I'm like speaking up on Facebook. But the more we gain, like the more vocal we are, the ex-Muslims. That's why I am starting to do like all these interviews, because people need to hear us and we need to gain like numbers. And when we gain numbers, then at least we will not have death threats, because the more we are like, as we grow our numbers, they're gonna go on the because we're exposing Islam, and we're telling, when you leave Islam you're killed, and they're gonna go on back foot like, no, no, Islam is a religion of peace, we don't kill, see, we let you talk. At least they're gonna go like slowly on their back foot. If we don't speak up, we get scared, we don't like expose Islam, they're gonna probably come and kill us. Like, oh, there are just few of them, just take care of them, and nobody will. They learn their lesson. Nobody will speak up. So I think the more Western news covers this, somebody should like tell CNN to cover ex-Muslims, that there is a movement going on. There are people who are leaving Islam. Their voices should be heard. Their life is in danger just for exercising their freedom of speech. Somebody should gather all ex-Muslims. There should be seminars, or I think we need to be vocal about it, that like the world needs to hear us. And I definitely think they're trying to Islamize the West. They're trying to take over. This is their dream. And because I'm talking about all my class fellows who are like in Western countries living their Islamic lifestyle. I was like, why you guys didn't move to Saudi Arabia? Like you could live their Islamic lifestyle there. Why live in the West, hate the Western society, hate the Western culture, but still live here just to reap the benefits?
Yeah, if you don't mind, can I just follow up very briefly on that? Because um, I was sorry. First of all, what both of y'all, everyone here is doing is really important, because I've been atheist for a very long time. I think I was informed by living in Saudi, but the point is, I feel like atheism is looked at as a very, or humanism, whatever, is looked at as a very white thing. I've been through, the Dawkins and David Silverman era, and all those guys. So I know those guys. But the point is that, like, I do wonder. I'm always curious when I come across minorities, quote unquote, like us, who are non-believers, because it's almost, I mean, it is rare, and it's almost kind of like there's a perception gap where people just kind of assume that, non-belief is a Western thing, it's a white thing, it's not for us or whatever. And I do think that obviously more of us need to enter that space so that we can kind of be an example or a lead, or at least give people and say, hey, like, it's not just a white thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I do wonder if there's a way that, from your perspective, if like you would change the messaging a little bit, of non-belief or something like that. Like, is there something you would do differently, in terms of trying to explain non-belief that then you've seen, Bill Maher or some of these other people do it? That was kind of where I was going at that question.
So I don't use the word ex-Muslim that often because I think it triggers Muslims a lot because they cannot imagine somebody's leaving their perfect religion because majority Muslim think their Islam is perfect. And when you expose these things, they gaslight you. Oh, you didn't understand. You should listen to. You should consult a mullah and all that. So I don't use the ex-Muslim just to trigger them or just to get under their skin. I use the word atheist. That literally means no religion because there is no evidence of God, and that's how I try to explain them. Most of my videos touch upon the topics from an atheist perspective. I do bring up Islamic Hadith because they contradict what the current morality is, and that they're just trying to show them how it is so backward. Like there was a Islamic scholar, there's a famous Islamic scholar in Muslim Pakistani Islamic scholar called Maulana Tariq Jamil, and his son committed suicide. And I made a video about it, how in Islam, if you commit suicide, you're supposed to go to hell. And so I just showed them that Islam, because in the era Islam was invented, there was no concept of mental health. So if somebody committed a suicide, so he's supposed to go to hell. So how how as a Muslim, how do you uh, rectify with all these things that are out there? So it doesn't make any sense. But then people say, oh, but if somebody committed suicide for, it's like anybody who will commit suicide will have some mental health issues. Nobody commits suicide for pleasure. So why are they burning in hell? So these things I do bring up Islam, and I don't know how you can soften the message without discussing hardcore Islam. They're gonna get irritated by whatever we say. Once you turn into an atheist, they don't like the word. They call it mulhid, and it's a very negative word, or murtad. Yeah.
If I could respond to that too, I want to say first and foremost, Tochi, you're absolutely correct. There is a lot of money behind the Islamization of the West. That's what Hijab Day was all about. It was about encouraging non-Muslim women to start wearing hijab. A lot of petrodollars coming from Qatar. There's Muslim student associations, there's a Muslim Brotherhood, there's Hizb ut-Tahrir. It's a huge, very successful propaganda machine. Billions of dollars are going to Ivy League universities in the United States to push these messages. So we are very much the underdogs pushing back against all of that. And also, what you said about atheism being a predominantly white thing, you're correct. And if you look at the statistics, just demographically, that is true, because usually Western societies are a lot more individualistic than the, Middle Eastern, North African, predominantly Muslim, for example, societies. And so when somebody decides that they don't want to be a Christian anymore, or they don't want to, they want to leave the whatever, they don't want to be Jehovah's Witness anymore, then they can do that. There's no bounty on their head. There's nobody trying to kill them. You know what I mean? It could cost them friendships, maybe even family relationships, but it's because we're such an individualistic society in the West, you can still survive. It's not that big of a deal, But you know what it's like in Saudi Arabia, incredibly tribal, right? Like that's probably one of the most tribal societies out there today. So you can't just make a decision in a bubble, especially if you're a female. You're seen as like the point of the family honor is in you. It's like between your legs, actually. And so whatever decision a woman makes just like affects the entire family. So women are burdened with all of this guilt and stuff. And so that's why a lot of them don't speak up and don't speak out. So you see it less in our societies than you do in societies that kind of leave people alone to be individuals. And the other thing regarding your question about do I ever think, or you're asking Madiha, but I'm going to answer it anyway, if it's ever going to be mainstream for people to be non-believers, I think, unfortunately, at the end of the day, most people are followers, NPCs, honestly. People just want a book where they can just follow. It's hard being an atheist. You know what I mean? There's no answers. I grew up in a world where all the answers were in one book, And now suddenly when you decide that you don't want to believe in any of that anymore, there are no answers. Like everything is a mystery. And it's beautiful and it's exciting, and the mystery and the mystique and all that, but it's also terrifying. It's really, really scary. And so for a lot of people, that's a really difficult step to take. And I think back to my mom when she would like look at libraries and bookstores, and she'd be like, look at all these non-believers reading all these books, trying to find the answers, wasting their time. Don't they know that the answers are all in one book? She found it comforting that she only ever needed to read one book. Like that is the most, diminishing thing possible to tell a human, like, squish your brain down and just read this one book. But for some people, they find comfort in that. Most people find comfort in that. They want to be the sheep. They want to be the followers. And there's always going to be some shepherd out there that's nefarious, whether it's Muhammad or whether it's Jim Jones or whether it's, the Scientology guy, I forgot his name right now, or any of these guys. They're always there, cult leaders, basically leading people into whatever it is that's going to serve them the best. And I don't know if we're ever going to grow past religion, because I think that we are not rational creatures. We're just not. And it's going to take a while, I think, if we ever do see that Islam is at the point where Christianity is right now. Like, you can believe in your faith, in your mosques, in your homes, but for the love of everything, stay out of the public sphere, stay out of policy, stay out of government, stay out of law enforcement. Like, keep your religion to yourself, keep it in your pants. I'd love to just see that. If I could just see that, then I would be happy. But to say, that one day people won't believe in, mystical absurdities, no, I think that we're always going to, whether it's religion or whether it's something else, all sorts of different ideologies out there that are, but all sorts of ideologies out there that are also dangerous. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we'll ever evolve past that.
I just feel like religion should be like social security number. Just keep it to yourself. We don't need to know. It's like, why are you announcing it?
Yeah. Okay, Khalid, you're next.
Thank you, Yasmine. Thank you, Madiha. Really, I appreciate it. And first of all, I just congratulate you that, I myself as a ex-Pakistani, I would say, so I understand all the things you have been through, and I really being proud that some of person from my country, the women, is coming up and speaking. Really, it's an honor for me anyway. So I have one comment really, and then I have one question for you as well. The comment I want to make is about that Pakistan was not radicalized earlier. I am born in 60s really, so I saw that good Pakistan. I'll give you one example. Sorry if I will take some time. That in 70s, I understand one of my aunts, that was the time when the people were moving to Middle East for work from Pakistan. And that was the time when the Pakistan started radicalizing actually. So I remember when she came from Libya, and I was a kid, she took me around in Karachi to find an abaya, the black dress they used to wear, and we couldn't find one single shop in Karachi to find that abaya actually. And that time we have we have everything, the alcohol available, the nightclubs, the beaches are open in 70s really. So I have myself the witness of that and the change. So I used to call the religion is indirectly proportional to progress actually. So you increase the religion and you reduce your progress, and that is what the society in Pakistan happened. So that's what my comment was. So my question is, even when I moved to Canada, actually, I was happy that, okay, well, I'm free. I can find people from my country back, because when you are moving a new country, you tend to live within your diaspora to progress. So people tend to find people from their own country and make bonds together. So to my surprise, actually, I saw mostly the Pakistani, they were more religious than what I thought they were back in Pakistan, actually. So I just want your like your opinion, that what was your experience, because I'm really shocked, and I couldn't find even one, even few families from Pakistan. They are to be more progressive, talking about, like, or maybe leaving religion or whatever. I mean, like, that's so I just want your like experience. How did you find that Pakistan diaspora in US actually, that I mean, like, were more progressive actually? In fact, as you said, like, the doctor groups is like that. Sorry. Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Radicalized just like back home. Like actually in Pakistan, people are much like girls are more modern. People have because they're trying to copy the West. They idealize West in Pakistan. In Western world, when they come here, they are so scared of losing their identity, because it's kind of an identity crisis kind of situation. So they try to hold on to their origins or roots so hard that they radicalize their children. They like impose this, hijab on their children and their boys, and they do cultural festivals and everything so much. They just overdo it. And that's why they are more radical, especially in Britain. They actually totally destroyed the UK. This Pakistani Muslims are so backward. You would feel like they're stuck in 80s when they moved from during Zia's era, when the Taliban's and all this were forming, and the Afghanistan war, Russia was happening. Pakistan was, given so much money and radicalized by Saudis, all these madrasas. They moved to UK at that time, and those people are stuck in that era. And same is situation here. The thing is that in UK, Muslims are living in ghettos, like they're more congested. Here, it's not like that. Like they're spread out, so they would gather in the mosques and all that, but they're not like living in ghettos here in America, because America is like huge. So if they got the opportunity, like some of the counties in Texas, they have allowed, call to prayer, azan. Some, I think in New York, there is one county where they have allowed call to prayer. So they're slowly, encroaching. They're slowly getting there. This is their final agenda, to take over the West. And I think Western people are so nice, or like they believe in multiculturalism, and they're like so tolerant, especially the left, liberal left in the West, that they don't realize the venomous nature of Islam and Muslims, because this is how they're brainwashed.
Yeah, absolutely right. I agree. Yeah.
I think Tushi has a question.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I don't want to impose. I just wanted to make a comment. I don't buy these people being that naive. Some people are naive. People who are maybe less educated or less powerful might be naive, but people in power here in Canada know exactly what you're doing. It's money. To me, it literally boils down to simple money. Well, I wouldn't just say refugees, because the fact of the matter is that people who are coming from the Muslim world come with a lot of money. Like we lived in Saudi, no one was paying taxes. I mean, my parents were just like, my dad was a doctor, like pretty regular stuff. I had classmates who were extraordinarily wealthy who were coming into Canada, United States, bringing real money out here. And people look the other way. They know, like people in the government here know that they're bringing in money, and they just go, okay, well, it is what it is. I'm disconnected from it because, I mean, I'm safe. It'll never really affect me, but Islamism will affect kind of everyone else. When a terror attack happens, it's not going to affect them. So I don't think they're that naive. And I think, to be honest with you, part of my issue with Canadians as a quasi-American is that people in Canada here the people in power are very silent, but they're silent not because they're like so nice to everybody and that's what they'd have you believe. It's because here in Canada people don't talk about things because it's easier. It's easier to control people when things aren't talked about. Right? Like immigration makes people a lot of money, right? I mean, there's like when a family comes into Canada, they've got to buy a house, they got to buy a car, they've got to spend money on groceries, entertainment. I mean, this is literal cash infusion into the country. So that's why people don't, they look the other way, but they know very well what's going on. Anyway, that's just my
No,
2 cents.
you're absolutely correct. It's very different than Europe, because Canada, we've got like ocean, frozen tundra, and the Americans, right? Like we're completely protected. We choose the immigrants. We even choose the refugees that we want to bring in. Do you know that when that Syrian war happened, a lot of the Syrian refugees that they were bringing in were people that were working in Saudi Arabia? Those are these are the Syrian refugees that they were bringing in. It's exactly what you said. Not only is it money, but it's also votes. They're bringing in people that they know are going to support them politically. Yeah, so we have the privilege in Canada to choose specifically the immigrants that they want to bring in, even the refugees that they want to bring in, the ones with deep pockets. I totally agree. It is nefarious. And if we're going to start talking about Canada, I mean, I have so much to say, but the problem is nobody cares about Canada generally on these things, because even though we're such a big country, at the end of the day, we really don't have that much political power. But yeah, we're doing so much wrong in that country. Lois, do you have something to add to that? Another fellow Canadian with us here. Yeah. If you've read my book, then you know how I feel about Canada and the mess that's happening there. Sorry, Madiha, did you want to add to that? I just jumped in there.
No, I don't know much about Canada either. So you're the best person.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Aaliyah,
you've been. Oh, sorry.
I want to applaud the great debates we have here. They're really brilliant. I see we have a debate in the chat about whether we can privatize religion or not. And it's a great debate. I'd like to say a word here. I think everyone who says they believe in God, what does that mean? In fact, these people are atheists. And the only people who are not atheists are agnostics, who think that it's too dogmatic to either believe or disbelieve in something you don't know. So it's what is believe in? It means suppressing your knowledge that you have no knowledge of this, and lying to everyone about it. So it is a public thing. It requires people to lie. It requires them to impose on their own minds to lie to themselves. It requires them to impose on others and to demand from others that they also lie. And there is a very beautiful line, the final 2 chapters of John Locke's huge book, The Essay on Human Understanding, the beginning of modern British empiricism. The last 2 chapters tell you what he's really about. And he says, he who imposes on his own mind will also impose on others. So you can't keep it private very easily. It's much better to keep it private. We've made a rule of that, but it keeps trying to break out.
Baby steps, you guys, baby steps. I agree with you and I agree with Aaliyah, but when I was saying that if they could just keep it in their pants and be more like the Christians, I'm not saying that would be like my ultimate if I had a genie that I could ask for. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying that would be a wonderful improvement upon Islamic law, upon, forcing people. In Iran, you get lashed for drinking alcohol. We don't talk about all. The Woman Life Freedom Movement has made the hijab very clear to everybody, but there's so much more going on, right? They force gay people to transition so that way you look like a straight couple publicly. You know what I mean? There's lots of horrible shit going on that really is invading people's privacy to the most intimate possible level. So when I say that if they can just keep it out of policy, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm just saying like one step towards progress, right? Towards treating each other like human beings. But obviously in a perfect world, it would be nice if not everybody believed in absurdities, especially dangerous absurdities. And Aaliyah made a really good point, which is even if they're keeping it to themselves, they're going to be mutilating their daughter's genitals. They're going to be forcing her into child marriage. You know what I mean? There's all sorts of horrible things that happen behind closed doors. And I know that. I'm very aware of that. And I hope that we can one day eradicate all that stuff. But for now, at least, at the very fucking least, when somebody comes to their government and says, my family is doing this to me, if that government can be like, okay, well, that's abuse and I will protect you. Like, at least, let's just start there. And then, you know, we can't expect humans to be perfect at any point in time. There's always going to be people that are going to be abusing their kids in one way or another. Muslims just happen to have like divine sanction for the abuse that they do. So it makes it so much harder to fight. And this is why, and I got so attacked for this, and I'm going to repeat it now so many years later, when I said that Islam is worse than Nazism. Yes, I said it again. And the reason why I'm saying it is because you can actually look at Nazi following people who follow the Nazi regime, and you can convince them, you can talk to them, you can get them to see the hate and the error and the horribleness of their ways and of following this terrible ideology and following this terrible man. But when you have Muslims, getting them to be unindoctrinated is so much more difficult, because now you're talking about eternity. You know what I mean? Now you're talking about burning, like Madiha was describing how hell is described in such detail. All of your flesh is going to come off, and then it's going to come back, and then it's going to go, and then just like, you know, ad nauseum for the rest of time. That's what you're up against. So it's so much harder to unindoctrinate a Muslim than it is to unindoctrinate a Nazi. And that's why I was saying that it's worse. I don't even know how I got there. That was a rant that took a turn. But anyway, Aaliyah, you have so many comments in the chat, and I don't want to hang up before you have a chance to speak.
Sure. Hey, I have a question. Well, I have a couple of thoughts followed by a question, but I'm really glad to be here. I haven't been part of these podcasts for a while. Thank you for Madiha for coming in. So I think it was okay. First off, I'm just going to say I do recognize my privilege of being here in the West, of being, you know, an American. But we all have privileges wherever we are, certain privileges, right? If I speak about Islam, my government is not going to attack me, but the closest people, right? The relatives and the family who has raised me, the community, they are the ones who I have to watch out for, right? That being said, I'm going to take it back to Pakistan, right? Madiha, it was really interesting when you said you don't like to use the label of ex-Muslim. I'm not big into labels as well, but you said that it's because it triggers Muslims. Now, when are we going to stop appeasing and kind of tiptoeing around Muslims, because to be realistic, everything will trigger them. Criticizing Islam is in any way, bringing Islam into anything will be a big trigger for these people. So like, what do you think are some of the ways that you are Pakistani, how Pakistani women like yourself could tap into the mindsets of these feminists, right? The Aurat March feminists. How could you tap into the mindsets of these women to kind of like wake them up? Because I remember I've been into, I don't attend a lot of Pakistani spaces for good reasons, but I did attend the Aurat March space, a couple of them, and I am a person who's not shy on my, beliefs and my opinions. So of course I brought up Islam. I was shut down completely. They were saying, no. It's the men who have taken our rights. Islam is so beautiful. Islam is so beautiful. And Alia, you just don't know what Islam is. Our Rasul blah, blah, blah. He gave us such rights in Islam. it's kind of like, I'm kind of like looking at this and saying these women are just not going to win because they're not, you know, they're not even tapping the root of this issue. Now, a lot of people are going to be listening to me and they're going to think, well, she has such privilege. She's sitting in the West, you know, speaking about Islam in a Muslim nation, in a Muslim country is, you know, that is a death sentence. But then how is change going to be made? Right? Like, people have to start somewhere, right? And I think if enough people come together and they have like this one strong voice, I'm again gonna, you know, use the Iranian girls and women as an example. There's just certain sacrifices that you have to make for freedom, right? And for how long are girls and Pakistani girls and women, you know, Muslim women are just going to stay silent because of fear?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm not saying that the word ex-Muslim is bad. I'm just saying that once you use the word ex-Muslim, you know how you're treated like you're an alien. You're like
Absolutely.
you're lost your mind. You're, you know, so I want them at least listen to what we are saying without triggering. But anyways, now it's out there. I've already done so many interviews with ex-Muslims. Everybody knows I'm an ex-Muslim. I put it on Facebook. So it's just like in the beginning, I was a little reluctant to use the term. I thought maybe atheist word would sink better first. You know, you tell them atheist and all that, you don't believe. And then ex-Muslim, but it's out there. Yeah, you're right. Anything you say will trigger them. Anything you talk about Islam, you talk about Quran, you talk, as long as you're like, you know, the saying, the what Aurat March women are saying, oh, Islam gives us right, but you know, the men don't give us right, you blame it, or Islam is beautiful, Muslims are bad. As long as you toe these lines, they're okay with it. Like, you know, Islam good, Muslim bad. Muslims are the product of Islam. This is they're the way they are because of Islam's. So people don't make, they have this dissociation or whatever, compartmentalization, that they don't want to take blame on, like put blame on Islam somehow. They're willing to take blame on themselves to protect Islam. This is how bad the brainwashing is. So you're right, no matter what you do, whatever way you want to, but I wanted to penetrate through this female diaspora, Muslim female, brainwashed, extremely brainwashed. They're so hard to. I've seen so many Muslim, ex-Muslim men, so many. Like maybe the ratio would be 100 to 1, or maybe more than 1,000 to 1. For women, it's that bad. I don't know. They pay special attention to women to brainwash them to Islam. They're singing praises more than men of Islam. They're doing rituals more than men. They're going to umrahs more than men. I don't know why. What Islam gives, you know, to them. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the people that I'm going to be having on this podcast soon is an Australian woman who was converted to Islam through these Dawa boys. So we'll delve into that a bit deeper then. Madiha, I want to thank you so much for the couple of hours that you gave us here. I really appreciate it. I know everybody here has really appreciated your wonderful voice and sharing your stories and being so honest with us. Before we go, I just want to give you an opportunity to just give the last word. If there's anything you want to tell us, like where we can follow you on YouTube, or just a word of advice to us, or, you know, I just want you to conclude this session.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and see other people like-minded. I'm like so glad that you have this platform where all of you share your ideas and thoughts. I have a YouTube channel, Madiha Talks, but it's in Urdu, so most of you would not understand. That's why I didn't mention it. But I mean, I'm glad. I just think we need to all join forces and make like more open public, maybe get news media, you know, something like they should be writing articles how fast ex-Muslims are growing, why people, they should like share our stories, like they should make a documentary. Like if somebody has in touch, if somebody's in contact with somebody like in media, they should like put these documentaries on CNN, on Netflix, that people are leaving Islam, that so to normalize this dissent and normalize talking about Islam, because Islam has enjoyed this umbrella of protection for a very long time, where nobody, because not because Islam is a peaceful religion, it's because Muslims kill people. Like we know what they did to Salman Rushdie. So, and now we should like openly talk about it, that normalize the dissent, normalize criticizing Islam and exposing. So this is what, thank you everybody for your question and for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madiha. And I just wanted to let you know that there is a documentary currently being made about ex-Muslims. So hopefully it will be out soon and people will actually watch it. Sarah's going to be in it. And yeah, so hopefully people will be interested in listening to our stories. I completely agree, though. You know, we do need to get our voices out there, and nobody's going to do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Madiha.